guys right to go? Thanks very much for joining us here at the State Control Centre. The Minister and I are accompanied by Kevin Parkin from the Bureau, Tim Weebush from SES, Commissioner Crisp and Brigadier Burr. I've got a number of announcements that I want to make in relation to agriculture, small business and mental health. Then I'll give you some broad updates and then we'll go to Kevin to give us an updated forecast. Firstly though, it is my sad duty to confirm that the body of a 65-year-old man has been found near Nathalia. We send our deepest condolences to his family. Our thoughts and prayers are with him and all in that community. Victoria Police will provide further details of that incident at an appropriate time. Now, obviously, we know that primary producers, those in our ag sector, as well as small businesses right across flood-affected communities, are doing it very, very tough at the moment. So many are without customers, so many are without a premises. That is to say, they've got clean-up, they've got equipment that's damaged, they've got stock that are either deceased or in real challenges. Crops have been affected. The list goes on and on. Those sectors are doing it very, very tough. And for some communities, this is a record flood event. Certainly more significant than 10/11, going right back even to 1974. I said yesterday that we'd be back with some information in relation to the ag sector. So today I can announce a $19.5 million initial package. This is the first package and there will be more. This is us getting in as quickly as possible. There'll then be further support under the DRFA partnership arrangements with the Commonwealth Government. But we'll leave those announcements as joint announcements a little bit later on. This is all about clean-up and about support for those who are without income and are in the most uncertain of times. Primary producers who've been directly affected by these floods will have access to a one-off direct payment of $10,000 to support clean-up, re-establishment and all the other efforts that they'll need to go to over coming weeks and months. As I said, this is an initial payment and we'll get these out the door as fast as we possibly can, but just the certainty of knowing that this is coming will be a comfort. agriculture.vic.gov.au is the place to go to get further details about that. We'll also provide subsidised transport, so we'll subsidise transport costs up to 50% to help farmers transport emergency water or fodder to move livestock, whether they're going to agistment, to sale, or indeed to abattoirs. Finally, agriculture, primary production will also be able to access concessional loans of up to $250,000. Those loans are stretched out at a reduced interest rate over 5 years, and again, an important part of our support for that very directly affected sector. Our agriculture sector is such an important part of our economic outlook, our prospects, so important to communities flood affected and indeed well and truly beyond. This is the food bowl of our nation and we'll stand with every farmer, every primary producer, everybody in the agriculture supply chain at this really difficult time. Small businesses as well are central to so many of these regional communities and indeed communities right across the state. I'm very pleased to be able to confirm that we'll provide $54 million in small business immediate flood relief. They are at the heart of those communities and we'll stand with them as well at a very difficult time. $5,000 direct payments, they are one-offs and again they are an initial payment and we will continue to work with the Commonwealth Government, with local communities, with small businesses to look at further support that we can provide. This is all about immediate relief, clean-up, repurchasing of stock, repair of equipment, replacement of equipment. Again, an initial payment. There will be more that will come at a later point. To access those payments, 132215, a number that many in the small business sector will be familiar with, given similar relief grants were provided in many different waves over the pandemic. There's also we're also establishing dedicated business relief service, a dedicated business relief service for traders. It's all about practical advice and support. It's pretty overwhelming when you think about what's occurring and has occurred in some of these communities, so any support we can provide is really important. Specialist mentors will also be there to help small business owners navigate their way through what can be very complex, despite our best efforts, quite complex grant programs. That support is very important. It brings together state and Commonwealth government grants and other programs and allows people to make their way through and get all those grants and other support that they need and that they are entitled to. Just finally, by way of new announcements today, we know that this flood event will have very significant impact on the mental health and wellbeing of communities right across regional Victoria, particularly in the north. We have invested very strongly in mental health, but there's always more that can be done. So today I can confirm another $4.4 million package of mental health support for affected communities. During the pandemic, people will recall we established 30 mental health hubs across the state to provide those wellbeing and support services. They will receive a further boost of $1.5 million. You can walk in or you can make an appointment, but they're there for regional and rural communities all the time, and certainly during this flood event. It is really important that people be able to access those services, and some of them may well be flood impacted themselves, but those hubs are in places like, for instance, Horsham, Bendigo, Benalla, Shepparton, and indeed when you think about Maribyrnong flooding, they're in Kensington as well. If you want to find your nearest hub and access those services, either walk in or make a phone call. If you choose to make a phone call, 1300 375 330 to talk to someone. You don't need a referral. You can just ring up or walk in and we'll provide you with all the care and support that you need. On top of those hubs, mental health services will also get a boost of some $2 million to deliver care within their local communities. $400,000 will be provided to impacted neighbourhood houses and Aboriginal community controlled organisations as well, as part of that recovery process, to organise events to bring the community together, that sense of grief and loss, but also healing and being as connected as we possibly can be. That's never been more important. There's also $500,000 for a number of different farming groups that are about the welfare of our agriculture sector, for instance, the National Centre for Farmer Health. We remain in constant contact with the VFF and others, and we'll continue to work with them and farming communities, regional communities that have been affected by this flood. I just again want to stress these are initial payments. There will be more, but the certainty of knowing that this is available hopefully will be a comfort and provide some immediate benefit to those who will receive that funding. School mental health is also a big challenge for us. We have already rolled out wellbeing officers in all of our primary schools across regional Victoria, and we think they'll be very important as school communities recover and rebuild from this event. A couple of other updates very quickly. We've got 14 relief centres open. We've got 13 aircraft in the air today. Can I pay a special mention to the members from 5 Aviation Regiment out of Townsville, the 2 Chinook choppers that we went, and those obviously massive machines that can move people in and out and move supplies, everything from fodder to generators in and out of flood-affected communities. I had the great privilege of meeting with those ADF personnel today. Deeply impressive people, committed here for the long haul and working very hard, and we thank them and their families. They're all from Townsville. It took them 12 hours to get here, and it is absolutely fantastic to think we're getting such strong support from the Australian Defence Force. There's 40 sandbag collection points across the state on roads. There are 423 roads that are closed today. Again, I've made this point, I'll say it again, those numbers do bounce around almost hourly. There's now 30,000 potholes that have been at least temporarily repaired by our dedicated road crews. They literally have been working day and night, and I want to give them a shout out and thank them for the work that they're doing. We've made a real priority of trying to have access roads, particularly for our ag sector. We know that large parts of our dairy country have been impacted by these floods. Getting tankers in and milk out is really important. We're doing our level best, and we'll continue to push on throughout the day and the night to make sure we open up more of those roads. There are some 268 roads that have been reopened since the beginning of this flood event. There's 800 properties statewide without power, largely in the southwest of the state, and I'm advised that's unrelated to the flood event, and they'll be back online later on today. So we've seen really significant work done around that Marupna community, proud community, strong community, but they were without power for an extended period. Teams have worked around the clock, and it's great to see they're back online today. The 74 schools and 59 kinders that are closed. And again, I'd just say, in terms of people out of their house, a good proxy for that number is the number of people who have applied for that $2,000 payment. There's some 16,000 people have made important applications for that support, and we're processing those as fast as we can. Without going through a big long reminder of all the different grants that are there available, the best thing for people to do, if you've been impacted, if you think you might be eligible for support, if you need support, please go to call 1800 560 760. That's the recovery hotline, and we will try and get you all the information that you need and make sure that those payments are made as quickly as we can possibly make them to you and your family and your business, and therefore to your economy and your community. I won't go through what's coming up by way of weather. We'll leave Kevin to do that, but can I just again, on behalf of every Victorian, say how grateful we all are for the work that our emergency services, volunteers and career staff, all agencies but a single purpose, keeping people safe, cleaning up, recovering, rebuilding. It's impressive. It makes you proud to be a Victorian, to see people come together with that sense of unity, that sense of purpose, that sense of being connected, looking out for each other. There are all those people who wear a uniform, and we thank them, absolutely. But also, let's not forget those people who may not wear a uniform but are reaching out and supporting each other. It's an amazing team effort. Again, I'll make the point, all of those emergency services, family members, everyone, whether it be a volunteer or career staff, thank you so much. And indeed, they'd want me to say it, so I will. The ADF partnership's very important, and we're very grateful to have them on the ground and in the air, providing that specialist capability that can only be provided by the ADF at a time like this. I'll now throw to Kevin to give us an update in terms of the forecast. Then Tim will go west to east in great detail. It's good to have him back today after a well-earned rest. Then Andrew, and then Brigadier Burr will make a few comments as well.
Thank you, Premier. Kevin Parkin, Senior Meteorologist with the Bureau of Meteorology, and I work very closely with emergency services, preparing for this current rain and flood event, and also for the rain to come. The purpose of my role here today is to give you the latest on the weather intelligence and what that means in terms of rainfall in the flood-affected communities. Just right off the bat, what I wanted to say was that the expected rainfall over coming days is not expected to be anywhere near as widespread or as intense or as heavy, and as a result of that, we're not expecting a return to major flooding. There's obviously major flooding occurring in the landscape at the moment, with pinch points along the Murray River, a real concern, as you're aware. But let's get into detail about the current forecast as it stands and what that means, particularly for the flood-affected communities. Today, we're just expecting thunderstorms in the far northwest of the state. No rainfall across the flooded areas in the north or in central parts. On Thursday, we've got showers and thunderstorms forecast. What I can tell you is that the thunderstorm forecast across the northern districts is not expected to produce severe weather. While there might be some local moderate or heavy falls, the thunderstorm activity should be pretty isolated in nature. The concern around the weather does increase, though, on the Friday and the Saturday. How does that look? Well, we're expecting widespread shower activity across the state, rainfall totals of about 2 to 10 millimetres. Doesn't sound like a lot, but it could cause some local river rises across the northern plains, but very minor in nature. Probably the concern over those 2 days is more the thunderstorm activity, which could produce higher falls of 30 millimetres or more, with the greatest threat being around that north-central parts of Victoria and the north-east. So that's in the upper reaches of the Goulburn, the Broken, the King and the Ovens, and we'll be watching that thunderstorm activity pretty closely and issuing warnings for more of a flash flood risk rather than heavy rainfall over a wider area. I have some good news about Sunday. There was some concern that we could see some widespread heavy falls on the Sunday. That is now off the table. We're just looking at some shower activity across the state, so that'll be updated with the official forecast from the Bureau of Meteorology as the day unfolds. In terms of the longer term forecast, Monday and beyond, we're less confident. We are seeing another pulse of tropical moisture come down from Queensland, but we sort of can't quite nail what that looks like in terms of quantities or the spatial nature of that rainfall. It's something that we'll be analysing as the next few days unfolds, and we'll communicate that with much more confidence, hopefully by the end of the week. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Good morning, everybody. I guess an indication of how things are perhaps moving to a more steady state in some parts of the state relates to the number of requests we've had in the last 24 hours. So just on 400 requests for assistance and around 26 rescues. So it is pleasing that people do seem to be heeding just at this time that message not to drive through floodwater. But we can't again emphasise enough, over the coming days we're still going to see roads being cut. There are still plenty of roads that are closed. Please do not drive around road closed signs and attempt to drive through floodwater. It may be the last decision you make. Looking at our flooding situation across the state over these next couple of days, starting in the west of the state on the Wimmera River at Horsham, we're now forecasting a peak with the Bureau at 3.45 metres, which is still in that major range, but it has reduced a little from what we'd previously seen of 3.6 metres, which means that we will see some inundation in and around the showgrounds and some of the local streets, but we're not expecting any properties to be inundated by flooding. If we come across then to the Loddon River, and that's one of the areas of our key focus for today and into the coming days, particularly around Pyramid Hill, where there's another community meeting today for communities to understand that overland flow that will be occurring, and also the Bull Oak Creek that will be reaching major flood level. There is an emergency warning out then on the Loddon River for Kerrang and the surrounding communities from Appin south to the north. We're expecting at this stage that the highway will be closed later this evening. So whilst there's an emergency warning out at the moment to move to higher ground, we are expecting that this afternoon there will be an evacuation message for the Kerrang community, alerting people that if they choose to stay, you will be isolated for at least 7, if not more, days in post the peak, which we're expecting on Thursday, which is at 78 metres. But again, tonight, Tuesday night, the highway will be closed in and out of Kerrang, so people need to heed that warning and make their decisions now about moving. We aren't expecting to see inundation in and around the Kerrang township behind the levee at this point in time, but outside the levee, we are expecting there's around 50 to 60 properties that could become inundated as a result of the flooding along the Loddon River. Again, there's another community meeting in Kerrang today, and we'd ask people to connect into that for the latest information. If we go across onto the Campaspe River at Rochester, we'd heard some concerns this morning that there may have been an indication that rivers were rising there. That is simply not the case. The river continues to recede at Rochester on the Campaspe, and to the point where yesterday we were able to take some bus loads of residents back into that area, supported by Red Cross and others, to assess some of that initial damage that had occurred in the Rochester township. The interesting part was the number of people that went in was actually higher on the way out. A number of community members chose to come back out with our Red Cross and emergency services yesterday, knowing that it's going to be some time now before it is safe to return. So again, the emergency warning that remains for Rochester is not because of rising waters, it is because of the risk in the local community at this time that it's not safe to return. If we go across further upstream to, or downstream I should say, to the Echuca, where we've seen the Campaspe peak, we're now going to see the Murray River come into play over the next 24 hours in particular. There is an evacuation emergency warning out for Echuca at this point in time. Relief Centre at Echuca still has capacity, but as a contingency, we've also opened a relief centre in Deniliquin in partnership with New South Wales, should members need to cross over into New South Wales for that relief. The other good news is we still have supply chains into Echuca at this time, so being able to get food and other supplies into Echuca is still possible, but please be aware the roads are closed to the general public at this point in time. There's been a lot of conversation around the levee that has been built in and around the Echuca township, around about 2.5 to 3 kilometres in length. That came about as a result of the incident controller working with the Catchment Management Authority, local government, Victoria Police and others to assess what options might be available to protect that town. The option that you've now seen on the ground there is the option that was preferred by all of those agencies and now has been implemented. And yes, that will see a small number of properties outside of that levee also potentially be impacted as a result of the Murray River, which again is expected to reach a level somewhere between 95 to 95.2 metres AHD on Friday this week. So that is a level that is exceeds the 1993 flood of 94.8 metres. Further upstream then to Turrumbary, Barham and the like are likely to see major flooding over the coming week. In and around Barham, for example, we're expecting potentially 50% of the homes in Barham could become under pressure. And we'll come back to you in the coming days around what that means for further along the Murray, from Swan Hill through to Mildura, where we are expecting to see major flooding. And again, community members need to start tuning in and being alert to that potential over the coming weeks. So it's not something that's going to happen in the next couple of days, but it will be something over the next couple of weeks in particular. Across then into the northeast of the state on the Goulburn River. Some good news this morning for residents in and around Mooroopna, where the floodwaters we believe will have receded enough that we'll be able to lift the emergency warning there this afternoon for residents in and around Mooroopna to start moving about again. And we're continuing to reassess the causeway between Mooroopna and Shepparton, which we do expect may be able to open either later this afternoon into this evening, which will reconnect Mooroopna with Shepparton for supplies and the like. In Shepparton and Kialla West itself, we're expecting that the major flood level will have reduced enough by Thursday into Friday that a range of residents will no longer be under threat. And by Saturday, we're hoping that the water will have receded significantly around all residential properties in that Shepparton and Kialla West area in particular. The substation at Mooroopna itself, now that these waters are receding, is expected to be able to be at a low enough level that we can start monitoring and getting that service back online. But as the Premier's indicated, temporary power has been put in place for all residents in Mooroopna. A little further along the Goulburn River at McCoy's Bridge, it did peak last night at 10.58 metres, and we're not expecting to see any further impacts there as a result of that. And particularly on the Broken Creek for the communities of Numurkah and Nathalia, again, we know that there's been some concern with the discussion around peaks of 2010 and 11 in other communities. That is not what we're expecting for Numurkah and Nathalia at this time. All indications are that the flood levels on Broken Creek will reach a minor to moderate level, and there are community meetings occurring in both of those communities today where residents can get further information. And finally, on the Hopkins River in the south of the state at Allensford, good news overnight that it's peaked and has not caused any impact along the way. I'll now pass over to Commissioner Chris.
Thanks very much, Tim, and good morning, everyone. Well, we're in all phases of emergency management, from that preparedness right through to the early recovery. Just want to focus for a minute around our preparedness. We've heard about the fact that Kerang will become isolated, could be for one to 2 weeks. And we know that as this flood event sort of moves along the Murray, that could be the situation with other communities. We will continue to do what we could and should be doing as emergency service, and that's very much about pre-positioning our resources that we've done throughout this event. Whether that's the boots on the grounds SES, whether it's specialist resources around swift water rescue, boat crews, aviation that can undertake those critical rescues. So we've moved those as this flood event has moved, and we will continue to do that. As part of that, and we've already heard about the large heavy lift helicopters, the Chinooks that have been brought in to support us, which means that it increases our ability to move even more resources into some of those communities. So we continue to do everything we can to support and work with local communities. I ask you yet again, this is a shared responsibility in what you can do for us and for yourself. And that is very much about knowing how to access good information to make good decisions. And as a starting point, again, please download that Vic Emergency app. I do want to thank many, many Victorians that have actually done that. We know that more than 150,000 Victorians have downloaded that app in the last week. So please, the Vic Emergency app is such a useful tool for all of us. We all use it, myself and the people standing behind me. The other part is very much about what we do with that information. There are various warnings that will be provided at various times based on risk. And you need to be across that information. If you get a warning around watch and act, it means exactly that. You've got to watch and act. There will be actions that we require of you that will be indicators about what you can do to support yourself. We will always door knock wherever we can. However, that is not always possible. So it's about being able to access information from more than one particular source. So please, that's what you can do for us. The other thing you can do for us, and we've been talking about for quite some time, if you make a decision to stay at your home in a community that's going to become isolated, please prepare for it. Another way you do that is how much food, how much water, have you got your medication in? Do you have an old-fashioned transistor radio so you can actually listen if you lose telecommunications and lose power? So there are things that you can do in support of our emergency services that are doing everything they can. As I mentioned, we're in all phases of emergency management. Another critical piece when we move into recovery and early recovery in particular is clean-up. We know that communities want to get back into their homes, and when it is safe to do so, about cleaning out their properties. A number of days ago, we announced the engagement of John Sling as our lead contractor, a company that we've worked with previously in relation to the 2019-20 bushfires, also the June flood and storm event in 2021, and they've just come out of New South Wales where they've worked on flooding events. So John Sling as the lead contractor, credible, experienced, and will do a great job again for us in our state. They're on the ground now. We see family members doing what they're doing, and we want to support them. Through emergency management, we're always on a path of continuous improvement of learning. And we've learned through previous emergencies and what we've seen interstate that we need a better way of actually coordinating spontaneous volunteers. Those wonderful Victorians that want to help fellow Victorians. So we've engaged Disaster Relief Australia. This is a really good organisation that's made up of a lot of ex-ADF, police from across the country, very experienced around emergency management, working with emergency services. So we've engaged Disaster Relief Australia to actually coordinate spontaneous volunteers. So if you want to volunteer, there's a website, Disaster Relief Oz, all one word, .org, where you can register your interest to support and work with communities when it comes to their clean-up. It's almost as though we need a clean-up task force because, again, we've got a commitment from the Country Fire Authority that do such a wonderful job during a fire season, but are well and truly out there helping and supporting now, but also prepared to help in relation to clean-up, about hosing out houses and what more they can do. So it is very much about the task force, and you should never forget the critical role that the local government are playing in all of this. We know, and we heard yesterday from Brigadier Burr, that we've already got those boots on the ground in Seymour and in Rochester, in schools, working with locals. So we will over the coming days further build this clean-up task force to support, work with families and communities. It is so important. I just also want to finish thanking the incredible effort of all our emergency services, our volunteer organisations that continue to do so much in support of each other. Their employers, those families that have not sat down and had a meal for some time with their husband, wife, partner, whoever has gone off to help other communities here in Victoria. We've mentioned many of those organisations, but I guess for me, for today, the call out is to St John's. They're sort of the quiet achiever when it comes to first aid and health, and I just sincerely want to thank all their volunteers who are doing such an incredible job. I'll now hand to Brigadier Matt Burr. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Premier, my name is Brigadier Matt Burr. I'm the commander of the ADF forces deployed on Op Flood Assist here in Victoria. I'll just give a brief update of some of the activities that the ADF have been involved in and what the force disposition is. So at this point in time, we've got over 300 plus ADF personnel deployed into the state, building to that 400 on the ground tomorrow. They're deployed across areas that include Rochester, Shepparton, Echuca, Seymour and the Greater Bendigo region. The ADF have been providing personnel, equipment, high clearance vehicles, helicopters, supporting those emergency authorities and assisting the affected communities that have been described thus far. They've been doing flood preparation activities, sandbagging, welfare checks, evacuation support, logistics resupply, transport, assistance access and initial recovery support. Including in those tasks is that filling and distributing of sandbags that you've seen across many of the regions that I've just described. We've also been transporting support to isolated families and emergency services across the region, as well as those responders, principally within high clearance vehicles, but now also with that rotary ring. And an example of that was the Shepparton-Mooroopna Causeway, where the ADF Bushmaster vehicles have been conducting that causeway linkage between Shepparton and Mooroopna for emergency responders and supplies over the past days. The ADF have also been doing some diversion of water work with some small dams, and then also the assistance with local authorities in some levees, and we've also been conducting from the ADF door knock as well of affected residents. I want to echo the Premier's description that we continue to be inspired by the communities that we're serving at the moment and the community response that we're seeing across those affected areas. I'll share an example of a local school that we assisted in Rochester quite recently. I had a call last night from the school principal where the ADF had supported that school, but as the Premier said, we're a part of a wider team, and there were volunteers, there were school parents, school staff, and everybody that was associated with the initial clean-up of that particular school. And it's that really drives the ADF forces to continue to do the work that they're doing shoulder to shoulder with the emergency responders that are on the ground as a part of that wider team. Thank you.
I'm going to take any questions you have.
Are you able to share any details around the affected man who passed away in the circumstances?
No, not at this stage, I'm afraid. Victoria Police have issued a statement which I think relates to a person who was reported missing last night, a tractor that was found basically abandoned, and then of course the sad discovery has been made this morning of a 65-year-old gentleman who's passed away. It's for Victoria Police to conduct their investigations and potentially link all of those factors together and provide details at the most appropriate time. So that's all I can confirm at the moment, but of course to that family and to that community we send our deepest sympathies. This person will be known to people right throughout his district and to his family and friends. We send our best wishes at what will be a very difficult time.
In terms of the support announced today, how many businesses and farmers are partners eligible?
There'll be thousands and thousands of businesses. There'll also be obviously thousands of people who are farming or are in primary production. They're in our ag sector. We'll have to wait and see how many people apply, but these are our estimates, so the total amount divided by the payments that I've spoken to before. But we'll wait and see how many people apply, and if more is needed, then that's not a capped grant. That's there for anybody who needs it. And I do again want to stress this is the first down payment. There'll need to be further support. I spoke with the Prime Minister last night, early last evening, about these payments. I said, look, we're going to push these payments out now, and then we can reconcile under the well-established disaster framework, category C and D support as it's known. We can reconcile all of that at a later point. Those numbers will grow. There'll be additional local government areas that are brought into this as part of the Commonwealth's framework. But there's a lot of support out there now. We've added to it today, which is important for agriculture, primary production and for small business. And we'll make those payments just as fast as we can, and we'll add to them shoulder to shoulder with the Commonwealth Government as soon as possible.
And you're anticipating a similar level of payments as part of that joint system?
Yeah, it's probably best if I don't speculate too much, but again, we are directly speaking with local government, mayors and councillors, local government CEOs, small business peaks, farming and agriculture peaks like the VFF and others. We'll continue to monitor the situation on the ground. There's assessments that are still being made right now as to how much damage there is. And then there are other assessments like the critical infrastructure like sewerage, like water, like power. Even once you've cleaned up, unless and until you've got those services back on, then you're not going to have the kind of customer base that you would have expected, particularly when you think about coming into the busy season for so many of these northern Victorian communities, whether it be cropping or indeed tourism as we get to the end of the year. So we will need to be with these communities for the long haul, and we absolutely will. And we'll add progressively to the grants as well as the other infrastructure and repair and rebuild announcements that we've made about roads, landfill, clean up, the lead contractor. We'll continue making these announcements based on assessments.
And the parameters of the criteria for these one-off payments?
Yeah, if you are directly affected, so you need to have been directly affected by the event, but if you go to the website that I indicated or the phone number that I indicated, there's all the details are there. And if you need that kind of navigation support to work your way through, then of course we'll provide that as well. It can become quite complex, particularly we try to make it as simple as possible, but particularly when this is a very stressful time for a lot of people, so we try to make this as seamless as possible, and we'll make those payments as initial payments as fast as we possibly can.
And could further payments be available to medium-sized businesses down the track?
We will make whatever payments we can make to meet the needs as they become clearer and clearer to us over coming days and weeks.
It seems that the weather forecast, the rain forecasting, is that a relief?
Yeah, it's fantastic news. The Bureau confirming today that whilst now we shouldn't sort of skate over the fact that there will be rain events in different parts of northern Victoria. They're already highly stressed. We've already got a lot of water in the landscape, a lot of water that's causing really significant challenges. So any rainfall is not good. However, this moderated forecast of much less rain is obviously welcome news for those communities and those thousands and thousands of emergency services volunteers and career members who are out there working day and night to keep people safe.
Just on another matter, Premier.
Sure.
The CEO of the Hamilton Hospital.
Before we get into that, can I just one question?
No problem.
Do you know how many people turned up to the Victorian facility?
I don't have an update today. It was 3 or 4 yesterday. And again, I just make the point, this is not for everybody. And I think there is a bit of a journey for people to go through, just like Tim was mentioning a moment ago. I think some buses of people went back into Rochester to have a look at their local community, at their home, and more people left than went in. So other people who had been there and had kind of waited this out in their own community, they decided that now is the time to go to the relief centre. So sometimes decisions, and they're very personal, very, very, very personal decisions. And for some people, the notion of being out of their community for not days but weeks until we can get sewerage and power and water back on, Mickleham will be a welcome option. As I said yesterday, we've got many, many serviced apartments. We've got all sorts of different accommodation options. We're literally inundated with offers, and we're doing everything we can to house as many people as possible. But it's not just for days, it's going to be for longer than that. And that means that some people will make that choice. And I acknowledge it's a difficult choice to leave your local community and go to somewhere quite a distance away. But I want to reassure anybody who takes up that option, we'll provide you with 3 meals a day, all the support you need, both mental and physical health, programs for kids, your pets can come. It's there, and I think a growing number of people will use it.
The CEO of the Hamilton Hospital says the facilities there are not up to standard, for want of a better word, and they're asking for a co-contribution of $17 million to complete the upgrade of that.
Sure, yeah, no,
what's your response?
I've seen those reports. We work with every hospital right across the state. We've invested some $12 billion on literally hundreds and hundreds of projects right across our state, some many hundreds of millions of dollars, some in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're all important. I've got no announcements to make about any hospitals today, but rest assured, we work very hard with every single hospital, their staff, their local community, and of course, you don't get hundreds and hundreds of projects built, many more underway, and $12 billion out the door over 8 years if health's not a big priority for you. It is. In regional Victoria alone, literally hundreds and hundreds of different projects. There'll always be more that we have to do, and we'll continue to work with every hospital.
What do you make of those the facilities there? So the current ED and ICU apparently, according to the CEO, fail basic human rights.
Well, again, I'm not here to run commentary on commentary. My commitment, my record, and our way forward is to keep working with every single hospital, and we will do that to make sure they've got the facilities and the equipment they need, the budgets they need. We have always invested strongly in hospitals the length and breadth of this state, whether they be smaller hospitals in smaller communities or big teaching hospitals. They're all important, and we've invested in all of them in one way or another, but there's more that has to be done. There always is, always. That's why it's important to keep investing, not to be cutting funding. I think I've probably addressed your issue. I don't have any announcements to make about that hospital or any hospital today.
Just one more. Is it the case that their health department asked the CEO to remove from online video that was portraying those concerns?
I'm not aware of that. You'd have to speak to the health department.
I have some questions for the Commissioner.
Absolutely.
Oh, can I just quickly just
Sure.
on that topic, sorry.
Yeah, sure.
And the Victoria's launched a review into the debt and diagram of, I know you're not about this, what the state government doing to ensure this isn't happening again?
No, I'm more than happy to discuss it. What I can say is, of course, we extend our sympathies to the family involved. The coroner will look at this. Ambulance Victoria are looking at it today, and I think they've stood up and provided some commentary to the media, so I'll leave it at that. More broadly, there are 2,200 more paramedics on the road today than when we came to office. They're all working as hard as they possibly can. I have met many of them, and they are. There's no more committed group anywhere. They're all working as hard as they possibly can, and it has been a very challenging winter period. In fact, the whole pandemic period has been incredibly challenging, with people always sick, record demand, but those AMBOs and those who support them at Ambulance Victoria and others, Esther call takers, dispatchers, the whole team, not to mention our hospital team, they're all working as hard as they can to provide the very best care. But as to the specifics, apart from our deepest sympathies to that family, I'll leave it to Ambulance Victoria to provide you with any further updates.
Has pressure eased on the ambulance service because the state government has dropped the COVID protocol down?
Sorry?
Has there been an easing on our ambulance service because the state government has dropped COVID protocols?
I'm not sure what protocols you're talking about. You mean in terms of COVID rules?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, sure. The total workload that's COVID related is less, and that's why we, as a national cabinet, eased the COVID rules. So they're linked only insofar as, because we had less cases, because we had less people in hospital with COVID, we were able to change those rules. But COVID remains a challenge for our health system, just as really significant fatigue amongst our workforce remains a challenge. Our nurses, our doctors, our AMBOs, cooks, cleaners, ward clerks, the whole team have done an amazing job these last 3 years. We're deeply grateful to all of them and very, very proud of them. But they're human, they get tired too, and that's why we're recruiting another 24,000 staff, because the best thing we can do, giving, for instance, free scholarships to nurses who enrol in their studies next year and the year after, as well as other payments and incentives and pathways. Scholarships are so important, taking away that cost barrier so that existing nurses can upgrade their skills, so that more and more midwives can be trained, so that more and more nurses can work in ICU and ED and critical care, oncology. It's a long, long list. That comprehensive workforce plan's funded, it's real, it's happening, because the best thing we can do for our health staff is to give them an extra pair of hands, and that's exactly what we're doing.
Do you think Victorians can have confidence that when they do call ambulance, they will get the care that they deserve and need?
Yes, because every single paramedic, every single nurse, every single member of the team is doing their level best, working as hard as they possibly can. They have more resources than they have ever had, But again, we all know, whether it's here or in Sydney or in Perth or in Brisbane, or indeed right around the world, health systems have been pushed and stretched. The pressure has been intense. This global pandemic has been a very, very challenging time. But as we push out of that, notwithstanding the fatigue issues that I just mentioned, we are seeing improvements. We are seeing better and better performance. And I can make it very clear to you that the day we were sworn in, ambulance services were in a terrible state. We then worked hard in partnership with our paramedics to deliver the very best ambulance response times on record ever. That was before the pandemic, just weeks before the pandemic, in fact. We'll get back to that because we'll continue to back our ambos and the whole team to do more, to do better. They're quite amazing Victorians, and we're there to support them. That's why there's 2,200 more of them today than when we came in.
Can I ask the Minister a question?
Sure, absolutely. No more for me? Excellent.
Sorry.
I keep going. The Minister's waiting there. She's...
My turn.
Go on, Minister.
The Esther dispatch service crashed last night. What information do you have on that, and do you know if it's led to any adverse outcomes?
Yeah, thanks, Mitch, for your question. And at the outset, I really want to thank Esther for their amazing work every day. But like the rest of our emergency services personnel, they have been working incredibly hard over the last week, helping our first responders with the flood response. I was advised last night by Esther that their call and dispatch system failed, and they worked incredibly hard to restore that. In the meantime, they activated their backup system, which is a manual system, and that went very well. The reason it went very well is that, as we know, continued investment in Esther, continued recruitment of more and more call takers, they were able to flip to that backup system and answer the calls that were coming through, regardless of the fact that the system went down. Esther will continue to investigate the causes of that. Of course, we don't want systems going down. They will seek answers to that. But the backup system worked well. There were no adverse events. I was in constant contact with the acting CEO, Deb Abbott, throughout the night and this morning. No adverse events to be reported, and the system is back up and running, and calls are coming through, answering very well, and I commend them for their work.
Sure.
Thank you. A former Melbourne water hydrologist said the warning that people in Maribyrnong River was between 6 and 9 hours late. Could you just sort of explain how the warning system works, or is supposed to work, with monitoring water levels and how that's passed on?
What I want to say in relation to what happened in Maribyrnong when floodwaters impacted on a number of homes in that community. And again, my thoughts are very much with those families where their home was impacted, and we will do everything we can to work with and support them. We know that cleanup has already started in that particular area. I'm not going to get into the technical detail of warnings. I think the important point to make in relation to that particular community is that early in the week there was a number of homes that were door knocked in relation to the impending weather. I don't think anyone in Victoria would have been surprised that the state was going to be confronted with a significant weather event that would result in flooding. There was a major press conference here 2 days before the event itself occurred. But in relation to warnings, though, it's about graduated warnings based on risk. So with our warning system, an advice message went out after the door knocking was done. That graduated to a watch and act. I talked about watch and act earlier in relation to, it's very clear in relation to specific instructions that people should be undertaking when it comes to that particular warning. It is about watch and act. The warnings continue to be graduated in terms of seriousness based on risk. When an emergency warning went out and to evacuate, accompanied with an emergency alert, we know that the area covered by those warnings was wider than those properties that were actually impacted. So there were those graduated warnings that led up to this particular event. So I want to echo really the words of the Premier yesterday. You know, the only thing that we should be talking about with the SES at the moment is just to thank them so sincerely for everything that they have continued to do. I actually had that opportunity last night. I went out to visit an SES unit where a number of SES members from various units that responded to that particular event were gathered, very much around supporting them with their welfare, and you know, they did an incredible job. They were talking about their stories, their rescues. I saw their photos of actually a boat going into someone's home and the work that they did. So, you know, they are taking very seriously the role that they have played in support of those communities. For me, it's not really a time to talk through the details in relation to that. Our focus is very much, again, on what we're doing to prepare for other parts of the state and respond to other emergencies.
But there were people who weren't told to evacuate until water was essentially at their door. So was there a break in the system?
I am very confident that the system worked, that there are a number of graduated warnings in relation to what was going to impact on that community in Maribel.
Would there be a response, a review into that response in Maribel?
Throughout every emergency, we focus on continuous improvement. In fact, behind me, every day we have people committed to gathering the lessons and the observations in relation to an emergency. We establish real-time monitoring teams. If not already deployed, will be deployed. We've got a team going into one of our incident control centres to look at how they're operating. So we are very, very focused on continuous improvement. We will work our way through this particular event, and we will do some work in relation to what a review of the overall event might look like in due course. Now is the time. We will continue to collect those observations and those lessons, but we are very focused on keeping our communities safe.
And in the regions, we've heard from people who are struggling with the emergency app because they're not tech savvy or don't speak English as a first language, or they're finding some of the information irrelevant. Is the app appropriately accessible and informative?
We're always looking at ways that we can improve the app, specifically for those people where English is not their first language. We continue to work on that. I will make the point that we do always say never rely on the one source of information. We know that there have been many, many community meetings, local government engagement with emergency services. Our emergency broadcasters are doing a great job. We engage with SBS in terms of what more messaging we can push out. Yes, there are always things that we can do better. We're focused on doing that. And if there's any particular observations that we need to take back and focus on for this event, we will do that.
Just before we do that, though, of course, 1800 560 760, 1800 560 760, that may well assist that group of people. That's the recovery hotline, and that can kind of be an entry point to all manner of different supports. I have heard reports that there has been an event, yes, but no, I can't brief you on that. I'm not sure whether anybody else behind me can, or whether that will be a sub. Tim can. No one watching this is surprised that Tim is absolutely able to provide a briefing on that. Over to you, Tim.
Thanks, Premier. So earlier this morning, and around about an hour and a half ago, we saw a magnitude 3.4 earthquake in and around the Mansfield area. At that sort of magnitude, we don't expect to see anything more than some shaking that people will feel and experience. There have been no reports of any damage to Esther and the emergency services.
Sorry, can I interrupt on this one? Just on my earlier question, can I clarify how long the call was answered for?
Yeah, I received advice from Esther approximately 9:30 p.m. and the system was up and down at the start, and then they prioritised ambulance call taking, and it was fully operational by around 3 a.m. and I will come back to you with really specific times, Mitch, but they were the indications that I took from my phone calls and text messages throughout the night and my follow-up conversation with the acting CEO this morning.
So basically, I guess for people who don't understand, what does this mean? Does it mean when they call 000, no one answers?
Oh, absolutely. No.
Calls were answered.
Yes, there is never unanswered calls at Esther. 000 put through the calls to an Esther call taker, and it's a manual system in relation to transfer to dispatch.
No.
Why hasn't the Minister for Health Relations called the CEO of the Western District Health about their route to her twice?
Again, correspondence between health services and the Minister for Health, and not something that I would be briefed on, but I'm more than happy to chase that up for you. The Minister's in constant conversations, the Department's in constant conversations with every hospital about every issue. The Regional Health Infrastructure Fund has funded close to 400 different projects across regional Victoria, introduced by our government. Is there more that has to be done? Of course. Will we have more to say about health over coming weeks? Yes. There'll never be a point where there isn't another project to fund, another piece of equipment to buy, another staff member to recruit. Always. That's why that continuous effort is so important. And whilst I'm not here today to make any announcements about hospital upgrades, rest assured our record is one of building, and we've already made many commitments, and we'll add to those. As for letters that have been sent to the Minister and back and forth, I'm happy to chase that up for you. Any other issues? If not, thank you all very much.
I'll double check if it was 1 or 1:30, but it's definitely